All right, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks so much for joining our third TQS Deep Dive Open Office Hours webinar. A few housekeeping items for those of you calling in. You are not muted, so if I hear background noise, I would ask that if you would kindly mute yourself, or I might mute you so that we can make sure that we're fostering conversation and dialogue and not background noise during this call. The call is recorded, the webinar is recorded. All of this will be up on the National Resource Center momentarily, probably sometime next week for your convenience. And if you can't hear us, it might be that you are called in actually through the computer, and we would recommend that you dial in. So that if you're having trouble hearing us, again, if you want to call in via the phone line and not the computer. But welcome, and we will jump right in. So these are our monthly TQS Deep Dives and Open Office Hours. We do these the fourth Thursday of every month, and we have one more for this season, which will be coming up in May, and I'll talk about that a little later on in the call. Here's today's agenda. So we have going over some standards, about standards, continuing the commonly missed business standards, jumping into today's topics, general tips for reaccreditation, some resources and questions. And so I just want to, first of all, in the agenda, lay out that this, of course, is open office hours, as the name suggests. And so this is really your time to ask some questions, to speak up, to voice any concerns or confusion that you have, and that we really want to foster a sense of conversation as opposed to just me talking for the next 40 to 50 minutes or so. So just dive in. We have the chat up that I'm monitoring, and of course you aren't on mute, so you can, or maybe you put yourself on mute, but you can unmute yourself and ask a question. And we'll be periodically stopping for questions, but just want to reiterate that this is your time. So a couple of things about the standards and the data used, and then we'll dive into the standards that we're talking about specifically today. So the data used is from 2017 reaccreditation. There were 35 affiliates that went through, and the data is from 31 of these. And what we're talking about, what we talked about the first 2 months were standards that where more than 50% of the affiliates going through reaccreditation in 2017 missed. And today we're following the more than 40%, less than 50%. So there's 6 standards where more than 40% of the cohort missed the standard. So that's kind of what we're focusing on today. So continuing with business standards. And why are we telling you this information? And that's because, you know, information fuels learning, and we're really here on the TQS team about the learning process. We always talk about reaccreditation, accreditation, TQS as a process, and that we're here ourselves to learn from you and from the great work that you're doing on the ground with the affiliates. And so we want you to learn too, and so that's why we're providing this information that we've gathered from 2017 in the hopes that whether you're going through in 2018 or 2019 or even 2020, you're learning more about what we mean by the intent of the standards and improving upon practices that you already do every day. So great, we'll just move on to the next slide there with the commonly, one more, yep, so commonly missed business standards. So these are the standards that we discussed the first 2 months of the TQS Deep Dives and Open Office Hours, and as I mentioned, again, more than 50% of the cohort were in progress when we gave them the reports back in the fall of 2017. And a lot of these are tied, and if you have any questions about any of these, I can certainly take those during the question portion, or you could check out the recordings on the NRC for these webinars as well. But then today, we're actually talking about the next set of standards, which, let me change here, are these standards. And again, you'll see, again, some of these are tied, and again, more than 40% of the affiliates missed these standards. So volunteer orientation and training, constituent engagement and advocacy, executive director performance review, website, strategic plan, and the Form 990. And so most some of these are clarifying and reminding what we mean when we go through the different aspects of the standard. And then also some of these are things where we realized from the 2017 cohort that we needed to kind of improve upon, making more clear, making fostering better understanding of what we mean and what we require with some of these standards. So I think we'll go through kind of, you'll see the ebb and flow of kind of the clarifying things, and then deeper dives into some more specifics about the standards. So let's jump right in. We have Business Standard 6.5, Volunteer Orientation and Training. Oh, actually, that's not true. I'm going to go back one slide and ask you, because I forgot we're doing polling again. For those of us who joined us in the March call, we did a poll, and we have some polls queued up here, and I would love, love, love to hear from you in the audience. So of these standards, which one are you most concerned? And Kelly, thank you, is putting up the poll question. We would love for you to answer, and we'll just give you a minute to do so. I think you just click on whatever one you're most concerned, or maybe you're not concerned with any of them. Got about 50% participation at this point, and we've got a lot of folks putting in their answer as they're most concerned about strategic plan. We've got a couple of folks concerned about volunteer orientation and training, one or two folks who are concerned about their executive director performance review. Looks like one other who is concerned about constituent engagement and advocacy, and we've got maybe two more who haven't started, and I don't know if that includes us. Might. All right, great. So it seems like there's a lot of questions about strategic plan, but then secondary to that is the volunteer orientation and training. So that's actually where we will start, and then we will move into strategic planning. So for the volunteer orientation and training, so first of all, we're going to just jump right in here to another poll question about volunteers. And so I want to know, do you have volunteers, and if so, do you manage them directly and allow volunteers under the age of 18? Do you manage them directly but do not allow volunteers under the age of 18? You do not have volunteers, or you do allow volunteers but the school district manages them? So thanks so much for participating in the polling. I love seeing the results and just seeing kind of where people are falling, and I'm hoping that this kind of also gives you good insight into how other affiliates operate and work as well. So just give another 20 seconds here. Waiting on a couple more folks to provide their answers, but it looks like our leading answer here, we've got a split tie for yes, and we manage them directly and allow volunteers under the age of 18, and split between, but we do not allow volunteers under the age of 18. So I'll go ahead and close this out and publish those results for everyone to see. Great, thank you, Kelly. All right, so why did I ask that question? And it's because this business standard was really tied very closely to Business Standard 3.6 with volunteer policies. And volunteer policies, as their name suggests, lists out all the policies that you have for volunteering. And we discussed this, I believe, the last webinar, and if not the last webinar, the first webinar about volunteer policies. But basically, there's a variety of things that we have, that we require with those policies, including how you manage volunteers, or if you allow volunteers under the age of 18. But what this Business Standard 6.5 is talking about is the volunteer orientation and training, which of course is integral when you have volunteers and you have policies about volunteers to want to be able to give them a proper orientation, training, and let them be the best volunteers that they possibly can be. So required for reaccreditation, as well as just things, documentation that you should have, even if it's not your reaccreditation year, are the volunteer information of volunteers, including their start dates, roles, and the date of review of policies, the volunteer participation in local orientation for volunteers, and then volunteer participation in any additional role-specific training. And what was most commonly missed was that while we saw a lot of documentation for personnel, for staff, interns, AmeriCorps members, and VISTAs, or board members, we didn't see a lot of documentation for volunteers. And there's actually an Excel spreadsheet that has that we have on the NRC that has 3 tabs. One is for the staff personnel, one is for board, and one is for volunteers. And so if you fill out that tracker with your volunteers, that actually would meet the intent and satisfy the standard. And so a lot of that documentation was missing, which is why we provided the example instead of just putting it in folksbox.com folders. We provide it right now on the NRC. So anytime, regardless of your reaccreditation year, if you want to track it in that tracker, you can go to the NRC and download it and fill it out. And why did I highlight the word date here? And that's because some of our a lot of affiliates choose to review the policies, of the volunteer policies, during the time of the orientation, which makes perfect sense. But if we do not know what the orientation includes, if you don't provide some sort of documentation just saying the orientation is a PowerPoint and you provide that with going over the policies, then we don't know that you've also reviewed the policies at the same time as the orientation. So also on this Excel spreadsheet, if that's not made clear, you just might want to let us know with a start addendum or something to let us know that the date that the review of policies is also the same date that they participate in that local orientation. So again, this is very similar to the staff and board Excel spreadsheets. Yes, the policy review during orientation, let us know, use the tracker. And then if you don't have volunteers, so we said there are some folks who don't, then we actually would just need to know that as well. So that's something that you would put in volunteer policies or maybe your personnel policies, just saying that you don't have volunteers. And then similarly, if the volunteers are managed by the school district, that's something that you would want us to know. And the reason why is because, we're reading a lot of documents when we go through the reaccreditation review process. And so if we see that 2/3 of this spreadsheet is filled out, the board's Excel spreadsheet filled out, the staff Excel spreadsheet is filled out, and the volunteer Excel spreadsheet isn't filled out, we might wonder, well, why is that? And then we'd go back to your personnel or volunteer policies and see, oh, they actually don't have volunteers, or their volunteers are strictly handled by the school district. The other thing that I think is a little confusing for folks that I wanted to bring out is that anyone really who works with a student who is considered a volunteer. So there's, I think, sometimes some questions about peer mentors, and we would consider those folks volunteers, and ergo they would be under the age of 18 and would need in the volunteer policies some special, there's some special language that we would require so that we know how volunteers under the age of 18 are supervised. So I think that those are the things that mostly were missed, and I'm happy to stop for questions after we go through these first couple of standards. So,
Julie, this is Laura Van Dusen. Can I just add one other thing?
Absolutely.
I would just say with those pieces of the policies, particularly around making sure that your volunteer policies list that you either do not manage volunteers or that you don't have volunteers under 18. As Julie said, it's really helpful for us for reaccreditation purposes, but it's also really important for you to have in there because, of course, as you know, if you have volunteers, there can be different insurance implications, different implications that kind of cascade out of there for your affiliate. So just making sure that you keep that in your policies, and that if you do then change those practices, you're able to update. Now we're having volunteers, and then thinking through those ramifications of what other policies, procedures, insurance coverages might need to be changed. So that's the biggest reason for that requirement and why we want to see that included, just to make sure that you have all of your ducks in a row and everyone in the affiliate knows either we do or do not do this activity. So it just sets that expectation.
Great, thank you.
That's it, Julie. Thanks.
Great. So next standard that we have here, there we go. Forgetting to flip over my pages. is Business Standard 7.4 constituent engagement. So I kind of wanted to talk about the difference between what's required in general, what the standard requires, versus what's required during reaccreditation, because this is a little different than I think some of the other standards. So affiliates are required to continue maintaining documentation of advocacy and school district engagement as it's outlined in the standard. But for the purposes of reaccreditation, you actually are not required to upload documentation for reaccreditation 2018. And the reason for this is that we noticed that there was a lot of confusion with reaccreditation 2017 about what counted or what would be acceptable for showing constituent engagement, and I think affiliates, rightly so, felt a little bit uncomfortable about possibly sharing donor or constituent information if they were in some sort of report where names would be involved, and then uploaded to to a server on Box.com. And at the end of the day, we know that you need to do constituent engagement to be the best affiliate that you can be, and we know that you'll be doing this, and it's not something that we necessarily need to check in on and see what you're doing, because whether you're using some sort of data management system or whether you're using another system that might just be a detailed Excel document or whatnot, it's not something that we need to check in on to know that you're doing. So for reaccreditation, as I said, you don't need to upload anything, but of course it is expected that you are maintaining documentation of the engagement that you're doing with your constituents. So I think that that's a bit of a change from last year, and something that we hope will mitigate some confusion and also anxiety, which is certainly not our intent when we're doing reaccreditation, to cause anxiety, and so we hope that that will mitigate those two items. So now we can move on to Executive Director Performance Review. So what is required? A blank copy of the board's Executive Director Evaluation Form and the board minutes. And what we saw were commonly missed were kind of threefold. So the blank copy wasn't uploaded, or in some cases it actually wasn't blank, in which case, again, we don't need to see specifics of how your executive director is viewed by his or her board. We just need to see that that person was reviewed by the board on an annual basis. And so we don't need to see specifics or a filled-out version. We just need to see the blank version. Other things that were missing were the board minutes. So I think that this is one of those standards, many a time it's kind of a two-parter, because in addition to the blank form, you have the board minutes. So again, just as soon as the board meeting minutes are ready, and you could upload them right to Box.com so that you're not forgetting to upload them as the due date for June 1st draws closer. And then what we saw on a few, just a handful of the blank copies of the evaluation form, was that the evaluation form didn't include professional development. And we have, for our other staff who go through performance reviews, we have those folks have a section on professional development, and so we would rightly so expect that our executive directors are continuously working on professional development as well. And again, that just goes back to this fostering of continuous improvement of your affiliate and the leadership there. So we actually have several resources on the NRC. There's a full page on the Executive Director and Performance Review. We have, I think, blank copies as well on the website, and so I would highly recommend that you check that out. We also get a lot of questions about if the executive committee or a different committee can review the board, or excuse me, the executive director. And the answer here is that if you wanted to have a committee, a small committee of the board review the ED, that is allowed as long as they report out during a full board meeting about the review. So as long as it's recorded in the full board meeting minutes as well, we would allow that to occur. Great, and that's all I had on that one. I'm just checking. I don't see any questions in the chat, so.
Julie, can you speak to, on executive director performance reviews, what an affiliate would do if they have a new executive director within less than a year?
Yes, so that's an excellent question, and I think that would be something that we would work on a case-by-case basis. It might be something that it would just probably be an extension of that standard to a time that we would work out with the affiliate to determine when would be best to do the executive director review, and then the extension period would be granted for that. And I think that happened at times. I don't know if it happened in 2017, but I'm sure it's happened in the past, and we're always very willing to work with affiliates who have special circumstances like that. Yes, we would probably do a 90-day check-in past the date of the June 1st time frame to determine that. All right, we're going to move on to everyone's favorite for today, website. Sorry guys, I keep getting my notes all mixed up here. Website, all right. So the website is Business Standard 1.5, and you can see here that up-to-date website includes, and it lists the various things. So identifying CAS and the URL, CAS mission statement, link to the national website, or links, could be plural I suppose, provides a method for making donations, uses the logo, and provides at least one specific staff member's name. So what was commonly missed was the link to the national website and receiving donations. And I think that the receiving donations was confusing for folks because while we encourage affiliates to provide some sort of credit card payment plan or payment option, that's not required. We encourage it, but again, not required to have a PayPal or other credit card processing linked to your website. What we would require there is that you would just have an address where people can mail donations. So it doesn't have to be, again, something that's linked to PayPal or another credit card processing company. It would just say, for donations, please mail check to, and whatever your address would be. The other thing that I wanted to ask, and this is where I'm actually throwing a wrench in things because I want you to speak up, do we have any merged affiliates on the call? Any merged folks? Well, if we did have merged folks, I would speak a little bit more about this, but the logo is just a little bit different for them. And so that's why the asterisk is there for uses the logo. But if you are an independent affiliate or a state office that doesn't, and you're not merged with any other organization, you would just use our logo as we outline in our branding manual. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is the staff email, and it provides at least one specific staff member's email. And so last year I think there was a lot of confusion about, well, is info@cisofhonolulu.org okay, et cetera, et cetera. And we just require at least one specific person. So if you had, for example, the CIS of Honolulu director page, and we had that person's email, and then we had, for general inquiries, contact info@cisofhonolulu.org. That would be fine because I could always go back and actually email the CIS director. But it needs to be a specific person, and then any other information that you want to provide. If you do want to have a general mailbox, it's fine as long as there's a specific person that I could reach out to. So that, I think, was some confusion. And so we would just ask that you check out some resources such as N10 and Blue Avocado. They're technology resources, and they would be helpful for technology and nonprofit resources, and they would be helpful for helping you update your website. If you have any questions about that. All right, now on to everybody's favorite for today, and that is our good old strategic plan. So this is Business Standard 5.1, and what is required is a description of the strategic planning process, the current plan incorporating all elements listed in the standard, and then the board minutes. And what was most commonly missed were the minutes showing the approval of the plan. The plans were not for 3 to 5 years, but were for a year, and ergo were their annual operations plan, or nothing was provided. And then we also have an NRC page on strategic planning. So last poll question, I think it's our last poll question, when does your current strategic plan expire? So we redid ours recently within the last year. It expires this summer. We are mid-cycle, or I'm not sure. Just to kind of gauge where folks are. We have a lot expiring this summer.
The good news to me is we don't have anyone yet who has no idea when their strategic plan expires, so
true.
Folks are informed, which is great to hear.
All right, so that's great. Seems like we have some folks starting a new one in the fall. And I think that actually sets us up nicely for what I really want to hone in on here with this standard, is that we at National are really more focused on the process than on the specifics of the strategic plan itself. So you know what's best for your affiliate, you know how much you want to grow, or how much you want to go deeper into schools, what constituents you need to get to be on your side, et cetera, and you know the political landscape and the climate of your affiliate the best, way better than we do here at the national office. And so because of that, we're really focused on the process of the strategic plan. We don't go into your strategic plan and critique, oh hey, you should be growing by more than 10% in the next 5 years, or you should be reaching out to these folks. We leave that in your hands, and what we're really focused on are these kind of what we consider core functions of capacity, sustainability, impact, and then we add in with relationship building. And as long as you hit those functions, then we really will be fine with what you decide your strategic plan for the next 3 to 5 years will be. Along that vein, because there was some confusion about how do you show the description of the strategic planning process, we've had some affiliates who do it during a board retreat and they just upload the board retreat minutes. Similarly, if it's just done in a board meeting, that would be uploaded as well. If perhaps it's a special committee or a special group from the board, they could provide some agenda items or any documents that they use during the planning process. And then lastly, if your affiliate is fortunate enough to maybe hire a consultant to help with the planning process, that's also some materials that you could help upload to kind of give us an idea of how you went through the process. And so we do want some sort of documentation. Again, it could be as easy as just uploading agenda items, agendas from your strategic planning at your board retreat or board meetings. And then the last thing that I wanted to say is that you don't need to worry about if your plan is not up until 2019 or 2020, and it was a 3 or 5 year plan, that we will take into consideration the time frame in which the plan was developed. So if your plan, for example, is from 2016 and is a 5 year plan, or 2015 is a 5 year plan and doesn't quite maybe hit on these core areas, we would look back to when the plan was originally written and the plan was originally planned to kind of figure out, well, what was in place at that time and assess accordingly. So I don't want you to think that you have to redo your strategic plan if you're in the middle of a 3 to 5 year plan cycle. And of course, that's because the TQS 2.0 standards weren't released until January of 16. So if you did your plan in the fall of 15 and then these new standards came out, we don't want to penalize you for something that you wouldn't have been able to anticipate the change in. Laura, do you have anything to add on that one?
No, I think you covered all those points. Thank you.
Okay. Great. And then finally, last one before we move over to some questions and open it up for some conversation, the Form 990. So it's just really the most recent Form 990 on your website, and the documentation was either missing from the website or the links to the website to the Form 990 were broken. And so this is just a really just a really easy fix for affiliates, but it's just such a standard that you can meet as long as the website has that uploaded form. And then we have a page of financial management standards, of which the Form 990 is included, and that just kind of goes through, I think there's some resources there on filling it out, and if you have any questions about that, it kind of walks you through it. So that is the standards that we're covering today. And so now I will just move us into, do we have any questions about these standards or anything that I talked about today thus far? And you can either chat in the chat box, which I will be monitoring.
So Julie, I think it's important to note here that 2 of those standards are for things that are found on the website, and neither of those are called out in the guides that are provided for what you should upload on Box, because there's nothing to upload on Box.
Right.
So just for folks who are going through reaccreditation, it's just a helpful reminder that you should be looking at the comprehensive standards and not just the resources that we give to you in terms of uploading to Box, since the reaccreditation process includes documentation uploaded to Box, but also checking your system data, but also checking your website and other presences there. So an interesting point to note there, that both of those website and Form 990 pieces are not things you have to upload anything to Box on.
Correct. That is a good point. I think people get into a panic, and I don't want to incite a panic. I can unmute folks if there are any questions, or you could raise your hand or put a question in the chat. No? Okay, well then I'm just going to move on to a portion about preparing for reaccreditation. So of course, this is more geared toward reaccreditation, but as you know, reaccreditation happens every year, so regardless of whether you're going through 2018, 2019, 2020, you can always be prepared for it. So, some general reaccreditation tips. There are a few things here. So in the Box.com folder structure, you'll see that there are guides in every folder, and then there's actually a full guide at the beginning that encapsulates all the folder structures guides. So there's lots of guides to guide you through what you should upload. And again, as Kelly mentioned, if it's not in the guide for that specific folder, that means that you don't need to upload it to Box, and it might mean that you need to do it elsewhere. So, she gave examples with the business standards of the website in the Form 990. Of course, with the student support standards, that comes in the form of filling out system and making sure all the data is in System 2.0. So they're there for you to use. We've had affiliates print them out and write on them and check them off when they've accomplished or uploaded something to Box. So really make sure that you're using them to the fullest extent. So we would also just recommend that you maintain documents on an ongoing basis instead of waiting for the day before to upload. And so that actually gets to a great point of also upload as much as you have. So as I mentioned with the strategic plan, one of the reasons why what was missed was that we just didn't see any documentation. And we're really trying to prevent that this year. I think last year for our 2017 cohort, they were really apprehensive. If they didn't think that something met the standard, they didn't want to upload it. And what we found is that when we did see the document, it either did meet the standard or there was only one or two aspects of the standard that it didn't meet that was a quick, revision or addendum. So we would just recommend upload, upload, upload. Even if you don't think something meets the standard, that's okay. We will read through it, work with you to see what parts of the standard are missing, but we don't know and we can't ascertain that information until we see what we have to work with and what's uploaded. And again, just please don't wait until the day before. I know that everybody will be in box on May 31st for the June 1st deadline, and I would hate to have something happen where it crashes or something terrible, so please, yes, that would be so bad. I don't think that'll happen, but I would hate that to happen, so please make sure that you're uploading as much as possible as you kind of go along. And I always use the thing of if you have a board meeting and, it's the next day or next week and you get those board meeting minutes, just scan them in and upload them. And then you're done and you don't have to worry about getting those minutes in. And then I would also just ask that we try to be as clear with naming conventions. So if you have an AOP, it's CIS of Honolulu FY18 AOP. It just makes it a lot easier. Along that line, we do not want double uploads. So please, 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 if you have an employee handbook that, goes through a plethora of the standards, maybe your financial standards, maybe volunteer policies, and personnel policies, maybe background checks, just upload that employee handbook somewhere, and then you can use the box note feature to let us know that the employee handbook covers all these standards, and then you can list them out. It will hopefully save you some time so that you can really focus on, the work that you want to do instead of uploading things to box.com. And then we just would, I always push people to the NRC. So we have actually tons of resources up there, including this fabulous TQS supplement that our team, Laura Van Dusen and Kelly Mears in particular, have really been working on, and we just released, and that can be found under the accreditation process and standards under affiliate standards, and it's I think like the third link down. And so that supplement really walks through standard by standard what reviewers, and those reviewers are us right here in the room and on the call, look for when we're reviewing things for reaccreditation. They also give lots of tips and links to the NRC for resources, and so it's really just trying to help you to supplement the work that you're doing, as the name suggests, and help you understand the standards a little bit more in depth. So I would definitely point to there. Quick refresher on the timeline. So right now we're in between the January 2018 to June 2018 process, and so we had this required webinar in January. We started these TQS deep dives in February. They'll be the last one, like I said, the 4th Thursday of May next month. And we're slowly inching towards this June 1st date, where all affiliates must have their documents uploaded by June 1st. A friendly reminder for those going through reaccreditation in 2018, for the purposes of SISDM, you do not have to have your data in until July 31st. I would not recommend waiting until July 31st. I'm just, for most folks, unless we've spoken with you in particular, July 31st is the date that we'll be pulling system data. Then we'll be completing reviews, which include site visits and verification procedures throughout August and September. And then we have a fall-winter deadline for voting for the governance committee. And so we'll be granting extensions after the governance committee votes on those. And so that's the timeline. Great. So then I just wanted to quickly go into some resources for you. So again, nonprofit operations, which is on the left-hand side there, the third box down, it basically goes standard by standard. That's where you would find that information that I said about the strategic plan, the executive director performance review, all of those things would be under there. If you're interested in the standards and either knowing the standards more or looking at the supplement, that would be on the first box on the left, which is accreditation process and standards. And of course, if you ever have any questions about where something is, you can always reach out to me, and we actually also have resource navigators who are always happy to answer any questions that you have. So another thing that I'd like to talk about in resources is just the understanding that you actually have access. Oh, Kelly, do my next slide. That's okay. That you have access to the National Resource Center. So the to the Nonprofit Risk Management Center. And the Nonprofit Risk Management Center is a nonprofit that, as its name suggests, focuses on risks in nonprofits. And so actually because you're affiliated with CIS National, you have free access to nonprofit risk management, and that can be accessed, again, through the NRC. It's on the main page over to the right-hand side. If you ever have any questions about logging in or getting access, you, of course, can speak with me, but if you gave nonprofit risk management a quick call, the folks there are super responsive. They always are willing to help out anyone. They love it that we send our affiliates to the resources, and so we really encourage you and want you to use the resources that they have. They have tons of webinars, articles. They actually also do a policy, some policy work where they will work one-on-one with your affiliate to create policies. So they're just a fabulous organization, and we really want you to take advantage of all of the things that they have. And then moving on here, we just have the webinar the Finding the Past webinars on the NRC. So again, this would be under the accreditation process and standards. We not only have the webinar series from this year, the February 2018, March of 2018 will be up there shortly, the April of 2018 will also be up there, but we did complete a TQS webinar series last year that went standard by standard through the different aspects, and you can find those there as well. And so, again, I mentioned already the resource navigators, so that seems to be good to go. The proposed webinar schedule, we just have this last one on Thursday, May 24th at 3 p.m., so we hope that you can join us there. I was going to just do some dives into the student support standards that were missed for reaccreditation 2017. However, because this is really your time, if there's a certain topic or a certain area that you wanted to cover during the May open office hours, please just let me know, send me an email, and I'd be happy to talk about that. And so now we'll actually move into the open office hours. And so I just have some questions here with what are your expected challenges with the standards and what information do you need to help you and your affiliate be successful?
There's a question in the chat box about.
Oh, thank you. I just close this so I can see it. All right, thanks, Kara. Will we be downloading or moving our documents off of Box? Is it okay to use our abbreviated name? Yes. So the first question about downloading or moving our documents off of Box, no, we don't download or move any of your documents. They stay in box.com. We do have access to your Box, but we usually we don't download anything or move any of the documents. And is it okay to use our abbreviated name rather than it's spelled out? And yes, absolutely. Just some ways to identify you is helpful.
So, and I think that brings up a really good opportunity to show off that TQS supplement because that's one of the sort of questions that we thought about when creating this TQS supplement. So I'm going to go really quickly and just share my desktop here and show you what I'm talking about here. So this is the TQS supplement. Let me make this nice and big for you all. And if you look inside it, it's broken out by the business standards. And what's really helpful is if you go to that business standard, which would be affiliate name 1.2, and I'll just take my time getting there. So if you look in here, it gives us some information about the standard itself, but if you look down to the bottom, there's sort of some reviewer's tips and a note here. And so the helpful note at the very bottom there reads, use the full affiliate name upon first reference, and upon second reference, abbreviate communities and schools to CIS. For example, communities and schools of Smith-Hunter County would be CIS of Smith-Hunter County, not CIS SHC. So that's sort of our recommendation moving forward into all of your policies and whatnot. So just make sure that your naming conventions are called out upon their first reference. This is particularly for external documents, but it's also in reference to internal documents as well. So I think it's a lot more important when we're talking about external things, but definitely want to make sure that you're using your CIS name appropriately. So this is one place where you can help define some of those answers to some of those questions.
That's great, Kelly. The one thing I would add, though, is just to be clear, if you already have things written out a certain way in your policies, do not feel like you need to go back in and change any of the naming conventions. And when you upload documents on Box, if you do need to do a little more abbreviation just to keep it from being super long in the name, that's okay, too. So that was a great example from Kelly for the supplement, but like she said, it's really particularly oriented to external-facing communications. But I just want to make sure we're clear. We're not saying you have to go back into your policies and do any of that name changing or anything.
Thank you.
Then we had another question, where are the recordings of previous deep dives? So actually, Kelly, do you want to share your screen?
Sure.
Or do you want to toss me the ball?
All right, let me toss you the ball since I think you actually have it up.
Presenter. Right. So hopefully you can all see my screen here. And this is the NRC. So, and the password for those of us who don't know is Empower. And the previous deep dives are under accreditation process and standards. So we go there. We go to affiliate standards. Again, this is independent affiliate standards, the merged affiliate standards, which I briefly mentioned. This is where you'd find the supplement, and then if you scroll down, you'll actually see the deep dives. Again, I only have February's up here, March and April's are forthcoming, but then all of the series from 2017 is out. And when you click on any of those, you actually can watch it. But then you can also download the PowerPoint to follow along if you choose. So that's where we are with that. And I can just quickly show you again. I still have to go back one more. Again, this nonprofit operations is where we've done a lot of the work on the business standards. So the strategic planning process has its own page. I'm sure it's catching up here. We have some resources. Again, Nonprofit Risk Management Center did a webinar on strategic planning, roles in strategic planning, and then we actually have some samples and a strategic plan template. So those are just some of the resources. Stop sharing my screen. Actually, I'll just go back to the chat. So do we have any other questions about any of the standards that we discussed, about any other standards that we didn't discuss today that you'd like to know more about? I know I talked a lot, so. Again, you can put your question into the chat, or you can, if you muted yourself, you can unmute yourself and ask the question. Okay, well, if you don't have any other questions, I can give you a few minutes of your time back today. Thank you so much for being part of the TQS Deep Dives and Open Office Hours. As I mentioned, we will be having our final one for this series next month, the 4th Thursday of May. And if you have any topics that you wanted me to go over, please let me know. Otherwise, I will be probably diving into the student support standards that were commonly missed for 2017. Of course, you can always reach out to me at my email, which I think is on the last slide, maybe? Okay.
I don't have access to more.
Oh!
You have to turn it.
Oh, that's so sad. I'm so sorry. That's why. Well, I'm trying to, but everyone knows my email. It's just my last name, Dennis, j@cisnet.org. It's not going. Oh, no. Oh, I was doing the wrong one. There it is. There it is. Thanks for being patient. All right. Have a great rest of your Thursday, and thank you again so much for hanging out with us today on the TQS Deep Dives and Open Office Hours. Bye.